Commander Veltar's 4 eyes studied the data streams flowing across his command console. The blue glow from the screens reflected off his scaled face as he processed the information his scouts had gathered from the third planet in this unremarkable star system. For 3 cycles now, his team had been watching the creatures that called themselves humans. The electromagnetic signals they intercepted painted a clear picture. These beings were constantly at war with each other. Radio transmissions spoke of conflicts across their entire planet. Visual data showed explosions, primitive projectile weapons, and organized violence on a scale that impressed even the hegemony's military analysts. "Sir, the behavioral patterns are consistent," reported his aide, a young Kethri named Zalvin. "They fight continuously, small groups, large groups, sometimes entire continental masses against each other. They show remarkable aggression levels." Veltar nodded slowly. His species had evolved from peaceful herbivores, eventually developing technology that allowed them to defend themselves. But these humans seemed born for conflict. It was exactly what the hegemony needed. The war against the Void Seekers had been going badly. Those dark creatures consumed everything in their path, turning entire star systems into empty space. The hegemony's forces were disciplined and well-equipped, but they lacked the raw aggression needed to match the Void Seekers' relentless advance. "Show me the combat footage again," Veltar ordered. The main screen displayed images captured by their stealth probes. Humans in various colored uniforms moved through burning cities. They carried weapons that seemed crude compared to hegemony plasma rifles, but they used them with deadly efficiency. What struck Veltar most was their formation fighting. Even in the chaos of battle, they moved together like a single organism. "Look at this section." Zalvin highlighted a sequence showing human soldiers advancing under enemy fire. They don't break formation even when their companions fall. In fact, they seem to fight harder when their unit takes casualties. This was perfect. The hegemony had tried recruiting from dozens of species over the centuries, but most civilized races lost their fighting spirit once they developed beyond their aggressive phase. These humans appeared to have maintained their warrior nature, even while developing primitive technology. Veltar opened a communication channel to the War Council on the homeworld. The holographic image of Supreme Commander Theklar materialized above his console. The ancient leader's silver scales marked him as one of the oldest living hegemony officials. "Commander Veltar, what do you have to report?" "Sir, I believe we've found our solution to the recruitment problem. The species we've been observing shows exceptional promise as auxiliary forces." Theklar's large eyes narrowed with interest. "Explain." "They call themselves humans. They're from a Class M planet with standard gravity and atmospheric conditions, population approximately 8 billion. Most importantly, they exist in a constant state of warfare." "Constant warfare?" Theklar leaned forward. "You mean they haven't achieved planetary unity?" "Correct, sir. They're divided into hundreds of smaller governmental units that regularly engage in armed conflict. Their entire culture appears centered around organized violence." Veltar transmitted the combat footage to the War Council. He watched Theklar's expression change from skepticism to interest as the images played. "Fascinating. Their weapons technology is primitive, but their tactical coordination is remarkable. How do they perform against superior firepower?" "Our analysis suggests they adapt quickly. In every conflict we've observed, the losing side develops new strategies within days or even hours. They seem to learn from defeat and become stronger." This was the key advantage Veltar had identified. Most species either won through superior technology or lost and surrendered. Humans appeared to treat defeat as temporary setback rather than final outcome. What about their psychology? Will they follow orders from non-human commanders? Veltar had prepared for this question. Our xenopsychology team believes so. They already follow orders from members of their own species in complex hierarchical structures. Their military organizations show clear command chains and discipline. The truth was, Veltar hadn't yet made direct contact with the humans. All their data came from long-range observation and signal interception. But the evidence seemed clear enough. These beings lived for conflict and respected strength. The hegemony could offer them both. Very well, Theklar decided. Initiate first contact protocols. But maintain caution. We've learned from past mistakes with aggressive species. Veltar remembered those mistakes. The Korthak had been powerful warriors, but they'd turned on their hegemony allies when victory seemed certain. The militant brotherhood of Zarion had been excellent soldiers until they decided they deserved to rule instead of serve. But those species had been united. Humans were conveniently divided against themselves. Understood, sir.
How should we approach them?
Standard procedure. Contact their leadership groups, offer technology and protection in exchange for military service. Emphasize the external threat to their planet. The communication ended, leaving Veltar alone with his thoughts. He began planning the approach. From their intercepted communications, it was clear that humans had multiple power centers, some controlled by individuals they called presidents, others by councils or monarchs. This division would work in the hegemony's favor. They could negotiate with several groups and choose the most cooperative. 3 days later, Veltar's flagship moved into Earth's outer atmosphere. The massive vessel, nearly 2 kilometers long, would be visible to human detection systems. They wanted to be seen. Fear often made negotiations easier. As expected, the electromagnetic spectrum exploded with activity. Human military and communication networks lit up like star formations. Veltar monitored the transmissions, his translation systems working to decode their various languages. Incoming transmission from the planet's surface, Zalvin reported. Multiple sources, actually. At least 12 different governmental entities are trying to communicate with us. Perfect. Competition between human factions would drive up the value of hegemony partnership. Accept the transmission from the largest military power, Veltar ordered. Let's start with whoever has the most soldiers. The main screen showed a human male in a formal uniform. He appeared nervous but maintained composure. Veltar had to admit the creature showed more dignity than many species during first contact. This is General Harrison of the United Earth Defense Initiative, the human said. We welcome peaceful contact with your civilization. Veltar activated his translation implant and responded. I am Commander Veltar of the Galactic Hegemony. We come with an offer of mutual benefit. Over the next several hours, Veltar explained the situation. The galaxy was under threat from an aggressive force that consumed entire worlds. The hegemony protected peaceful civilizations but needed allies in the fight. In exchange for military assistance, humans would receive advanced technology and protection for their planet. What surprised Veltar was how quickly the humans grasped the concept. Most species required days or weeks to accept the reality of galactic civilization. Humans seemed to take it in stride, immediately asking practical questions about force numbers, enemy capabilities, and strategic objectives. You're asking us to provide soldiers for an interstellar war, General Harrison summarized. In exchange, you'll give us technology and guarantee Earth's protection. Correct. Your species shows remarkable aptitude for organized combat. We believe this arrangement benefits both our peoples. What kind of technology are we talking about? Veltar transmitted basic schematics for hegemony small arms, medical devices, and transportation systems. The human's eyes widened as he reviewed the data. This is... Harrison paused, consulting with advisors off-screen. This represents advances our civilization won't achieve for centuries. The hegemony has existed for over 10,000 years. We offer knowledge your species would eventually develop, but in months rather than millennia. More discussions followed. Other human governmental groups demanded inclusion in the negotiations. Some expressed suspicion about hegemony motives, but the promise of advanced technology overcame most objections. Within a week, preliminary agreements were in place. Several human military organizations would provide volunteer forces for training and eventual deployment. In return, the hegemony would begin technology transfers and establish protective platforms around Earth. The first group of human volunteers arrived at Veltar's ship 2 weeks later. 50 soldiers from various Earth military units selected for their experience and adaptability. Veltar observed them through the shuttle bay's security cameras as they disembarked. They moved with confidence despite being in an alien environment. Their leader, a female introduced as Captain Jiwon Park, maintained perfect military bearing while her eyes constantly scanned for threats and tactical advantages. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Minho Kim, did the same while keeping his weapon ready but not threatening. Most interesting was the human they called Dr. Hana Lee. She wasn't a soldier but some kind of scientist. She stared at everything with intense curiosity, occasionally making notes on a primitive electronic device. Commander, Zalvin whispered, they don't seem intimidated by our technology. It was true. Most SP. Tactical analyst Zephyr adjusted his viewing angle as he watched the human training exercises through the observation deck's reinforced windows. 6 months had passed since first contact, and the initial batch of human volunteers had exceeded all expectations in terms of raw physical capability. Yet something about their behavior troubled him in ways he couldn't quite articulate. The training facility on Kepler Station housed over 300 human soldiers now, drawn from various Earth military organizations. They'd adapted to alien technology with remarkable speed, mastering hegemony weapons and equipment in weeks rather than the months typically required by new auxiliary species. Analyst Zephyr, his assistant, Corvell, approached with the latest performance reports. The humans have completed their endurance trials. The results are unusual. Zephyr accepted the data tablet, scanning the numbers with growing confusion. These can't be correct. According to this, the human soldiers maintained combat effectiveness for 18 standard hours without rest. I verified the readings myself. Furthermore, when we introduced stress factors like simulated casualties and equipment failures, their performance actually improved. This defied everything Zephyr knew about combat psychology. Most species showed declining performance under stress, requiring careful rotation and recovery periods. Elite hegemony units could maintain peak effectiveness for perhaps 10 hours before requiring substantial rest. What about their formation fighting? Any improvement in coordination? Corvell's expression grew more puzzled. Sir, that's the strange part. They don't seem to be learning coordination so much as remembering it. Watch this. The assistant activated a holographic display showing the previous day's training exercise. Human soldiers moved through a simulated battlefield with fluid precision. When one unit encountered unexpected resistance, nearby groups immediately adjusted their positions to provide support. No orders were given, no communication detected, yet the entire force responded as a single entity. How are they communicating? Zephyr asked. Our sensors detect no electronic signals between units. We believe it's some form of non-verbal communication system. Hand signals, body language, perhaps even pheromone detection. Their species appears to have evolved remarkably sophisticated social coordination mechanisms. Zephyr watched the hologram replay. A human soldier designated as Sergeant Donghyun Choi led his squad through a building clearing exercise. When they encountered a simulated enemy position, Choi made a series of subtle gestures. His team immediately split into coordinated elements, flanking the position while maintaining perfect timing. What disturbed Zephyr wasn't the effectiveness, it was the casual nature of the coordination. These weren't learned military maneuvers. They moved like pack predators who'd hunted together for years. Have you observed their social interactions during rest periods? Zephyr asked. Extensively. They engage in what they call bonding rituals, sharing stories, competitive games, collective meal preparation. Our xenopsychology department initially classified these as weakness indicators. Initially? Corvell pulled up another display. Further analysis suggests these activities actually strengthen unit cohesion. Humans who participate in more social bonding show higher coordination scores in combat simulations. This ran counter to military doctrine across dozens of species. Emotional attachment between soldiers typically led to hesitation, poor decision-making, and collapse when units took casualties. Professional armies maintained respectful distance between personnel to prevent such complications. Show me their casualty response protocols, Zephyr ordered. The next set of recordings showed simulated scenarios where human soldiers were designated as wounded or killed. Instead of the expected shock and reduced effectiveness, the remaining humans became more focused and aggressive. Their coordination tightened, and they took greater risks to accomplish objectives. In this scenario, Corvell highlighted a sequence. We simulated the loss of squad leader Donghyun. Rather than falling apart, his subordinates immediately reorganized under Corporal Suman Kang. Their effectiveness actually increased by 12%. Zephyr studied the data more carefully. Traditional military theory suggested that units performed best when soldiers viewed their comrades as professional colleagues rather than personal friends. Emotional detachment allowed for rational decision-making under stress. But these humans seem to operate on entirely different principles. What does Dr. Melkar's psychological assessment team conclude? They're confused, sir. The humans display strong emotional bonds with their unit members. Yet this appears to enhance rather than impair their combat effectiveness. Dr. Melkar has requested permission to conduct more invasive psychological testing. Denied. We need these soldiers functional, not traumatized by our probing. Zephyr made a note in his personal files. Something fundamental about human psychology was eluding their analysis, but it didn't matter, as long as they remained effective fighters. He decided to observe a training session directly. The exercise area sprawled across several kilometers of varied terrain, urban environments, forest sections, open ground, and underground tunnel systems. Today's scenario involved clearing a fortified position, defended by automated systems programmed to match Void Seeker tactics. The human force was organized into what they called companies, roughly equivalent to hegemony tactical units. Zephyr watched Captain Jiwon Park coordinate the assault through her command post's displays. She'd proven to be a natural leader, somehow maintaining awareness of multiple simultaneous operations while making tactical decisions with impressive speed. Captain Park, Zephyr activated the communication system. This is Tactical Analyst Zephyr observing from Control Station 7. How do you assess the current exercise? Park's image appeared on his screen. Even in combat armor, she maintained the composure that had impressed Veltar during first contact. Analyst Zephyr, the defensive systems are more sophisticated than our previous encounters. We're adapting our approach accordingly. Adapting how? We've identified weak points in the sensor network and developed new infiltration routes. Private Wujin is coordinating with Sergeant Dongyun to exploit those vulnerabilities. Zephyr checked his tactical display. The human designated as Wujin Seo was barely out of adolescence by their species standards, yet he'd somehow penetrated defense networks that should have been impregnable to their technology level. More concerning, he was sharing his discoveries with other units in real time. How is Private Wujin accessing the defense systems? Those networks are isolated from external interference. Captain Park smiled and Zephyr felt an odd chill. Wujin is very good with electronics, sir. He finds creative solutions to technical problems. On the tactical display, Zephyr watched as human forces began moving through supposedly secure areas. Somehow, the young private had not only accessed the defense network, but was actively feeding false information to the automated systems. Sensors reported empty corridors while human soldiers moved freely through them. Captain, that should be impossible with your current technology level. Perhaps, sir, but Wujin doesn't always follow standard technical procedures. The assault concluded with complete success. Human forces eliminated all defensive positions while taking 0 casualties. More troubling, they accomplished this using improvised tactics that no hegemony manual contained. When automated defenses adapted to counter their initial approaches, the humans immediately developed new strategies. After the exercise, Zephyr requested a private interview with Private Wujin. The young human appeared nervous but cooperative as he entered the analysis chamber. Private Wujin, can you explain how you accessed the defense network during today's exercise? Wujin shifted uncomfortably. I noticed the sensor arrays were using standard quantum encryption, sir. There's a known vulnerability in the base algorithm that allows backdoor access if you know the right approach sequence. Known vulnerability? Known to whom? Well, to anyone who's studied quantum encryption theory, sir. It's pretty basic stuff. Zephyr felt his confidence wavering. Quantum encryption represented some of the hegemony's most advanced technology. The idea that a primitive human could identify vulnerabilities in basic stuff suggested fundamental misunderstandings about their technological development. Where did you learn about quantum encryption, Private? From Dr. Lee, sir. She's been teaching us about various technical systems during our off-duty time. She says understanding alien technology is important for integration success. Dr. Hana Lee, the human scientist, had requested access to hegemony, technical databases for educational purposes. Command had approved limited access, assuming that primitive minds couldn't grasp advanced concepts quickly enough to pose security risks. What else has Dr. Lee taught you? Wujin brightened. Lots of things, sir. Energy weapon maintenance, spacecraft navigation principles, artificial intelligence architecture, biotechnology applications. She's really smart. Each topic Wujin mentioned represented years of specialized study for hegemony technicians. The possibility that humans were absorbing this information casually during off-duty time was deeply unsettling. Private, in your opinion, how do human weapons compare to hegemony technology? Our old weapons? Wujin considered the question. Field Commander Quindal reviewed the mission briefing one final time as his assault fleet approached Kalos Prime. The operation should be straightforward. AI, simple raid on a minor Void Seeker outpost to test human combat effectiveness under real conditions. Intelligence indicated minimal enemy presence, making it an ideal first deployment for their new auxiliary forces. Commander, his tactical officer Rendell reported, "We're receiving final confirmation from the human units. Captain Park's company is ready for deployment." Quindell nodded, watching the tactical displays that showed 50 human soldiers preparing for their first real combat against the Void Seekers. After months of training and evaluation, Command had decided to test human capabilities in a low-risk environment. The outpost on Kalos Prime contained perhaps 20 Void Seeker drones, dangerous individually but easily overwhelmed by proper tactics and superior firepower. "What's our support configuration?" Quindell asked. 2 hegemony assault units standing by, plus orbital bombardment capability if needed. The humans requested minimal support, claiming they wanted to prove their effectiveness independently. That concerned Quindell slightly. New auxiliary species typically demanded maximum support for their first real combat. Human confidence might indicate either exceptional capability or dangerous overconfidence. Either way, hegemony forces would be ready to intervene if the situation deteriorated. The transport ships descended toward Kalos Prime's surface under cover of darkness. The planet was a barren world with minimal atmosphere, chosen by the Void Seekers as a staging area for their expansion into this sector. Destroying the outpost would slow their advance while providing valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities. "Human forces have landed successfully," Rendell reported. "Captain Park confirms her troops are moving toward the target facility." Quindell activated the observation channels, linking his command center to the cameras mounted on human combat armor. He wanted to observe their first real battle personally, both to assess their effectiveness and to identify any tactical weaknesses that required correction. The human soldiers moved across Kalos Prime's rocky terrain with impressive speed and coordination. Even in the low-light conditions, they maintained perfect formation discipline while covering significant ground. Their primitive night vision equipment seemed remarkably effective for such basic technology. "Commander," Rendell's voice carried a note of confusion, "we're detecting movement from the target facility. Much more than intelligence predicted." The tactical display updated, showing energy signatures consistent with at least 100 Void Seeker drones. Not 20 as expected, but a full combat garrison. Worse, the signatures indicated heavy combat variants, the kind that required concentrated firepower to eliminate effectively. "Alert the human forces immediately," Quindell ordered. "They're walking into a trap." The communication channel crackled as Rendell transmitted the warning. Captain Park's voice responded with calm professionalism that surprised Quindell given the circumstances. "Understood, Command. We confirm increased enemy presence, adjusting tactics accordingly. Captain, recommend immediate withdrawal for reinforcement. Enemy strength exceeds mission parameters by 500%. Negative, Command. We're already committed to the assault. Withdrawal would expose us to pursuit in open terrain." Quindell felt his stomach clench. Standard doctrine called for immediate retreat when facing overwhelming odds. The humans were making a tactical error that would likely result in total unit loss. "Captain Park, this is a direct order. Withdraw immediately for orbital extraction. Sir, with respect, we're going to complete the mission. Park out." The communication channel went silent. Quindell stared at his displays in disbelief. No auxiliary species had ever disobeyed direct orders during their first combat deployment. Human arrogance was about to get them all killed. "Prepare hegemony assault units for immediate deployment," he ordered. "We'll have to rescue what's left of the human force." On the observation screens, Quindell watched the human soldiers approach the Void Seeker facility. The enemy had clearly detected their presence. Defensive systems were powering up and combat drones were moving into position. 50 humans against 100 enhanced Void Seekers was suicide. Then something impossible happened. The humans vanished. One moment they were visible on both optical and thermal sensors, moving in standard assault formation. The next moment, the sensors showed empty terrain. Quindell blinked his 4 eyes, certain the equipment had malfunctioned. "Rendell, are we experiencing sensor failure?" "No, sir, all systems functioning normally." "The humans just disappeared. That's impossible. 50 soldiers don't simply disappear." "Sir, I'm detecting some kind of interference pattern. Very subtle, but it's affecting our remote sensors. It's almost like they're generating a localized stealth field." Quindell examined the data more carefully. The humans carried no stealth technology. Their equipment had been thoroughly cataloged during training. Yet somehow they'd become effectively invisible to the most advanced sensor systems in the galaxy. Are they using some kind of natural camouflage technique? Unknown, sir. But watch this. The tactical display shifted to infrared spectrum. For a brief moment, Quindal caught glimpses of heat signatures moving around the Void Seeker facility. The signatures appeared to be human-sized, but they moved in ways that seemed to defy physics, appearing and disappearing, changing direction impossibly fast, sometimes seeming to be in multiple locations simultaneously. This doesn't make sense, Quindal muttered. Are we looking at sensor ghosts or actual movement? His question was answered when the first explosions erupted inside the Void Seeker facility. Primary power systems overloaded and cascading failures that suggested sophisticated sabotage rather than external attack. Emergency lighting flickered on, revealing Void Seeker drones rushing toward defensive positions. The drones never made it. Dark shapes moved among them like smoke, striking with precise efficiency. Individual Void Seekers simply stopped functioning, their energy signatures winking out one by one. No energy weapon discharges, no explosive detonations, just sudden, silent death moving through enemy ranks. How are they doing this? Randall whispered. Quindal had no answer. The humans seemed to be fighting a completely different kind of war than anything in hegemony tactical manuals. They weren't using superior firepower or advanced technology. They were using methods that bordered on supernatural. Sir, I'm detecting acoustic signatures from inside the facility. It sounds like screaming. Void Seekers didn't scream. They were mechanical constructs driven by artificial intelligence, incapable of fear or pain. Yet the audio pickups were clearly recording sounds of distress and terror emanating from the enemy facility. More explosions rocked the complex as critical systems failed throughout the structure. The Void Seekers were losing cohesion, their coordinated defense collapsing into chaotic individual responses. Whatever the humans were doing, it was causing systematic breakdown of enemy organization. Commander, Rendell's voice was strained. Thermal imaging is picking up combat activity in the lower levels. It looks like the humans have penetrated to the facility's core. Quindal watched in amazement as the tactical display showed human heat signatures moving through areas that should have been heavily defended. They weren't fighting their way through enemy positions. They were simply appearing where they needed to be, accomplishing objectives, then moving to the next target. How did they get inside the facility? We never observed a breach. Unknown, sir. They must have found an entry point our sensors couldn't detect. The battle was over in less than 30 minutes. The Void Seeker facility went dark as its power core was somehow disabled from within. Emergency beacons stopped transmitting. Combat drones ceased all activity. An entire enemy garrison had been eliminated by 50 human soldiers using primitive equipment. Then the humans reappeared, as suddenly as they'd vanished. Captain Park's voice came through the communication channel with the same calm professionalism she'd shown throughout the operation. Command, this is Captain Park. Objective secured. Enemy facility neutralized with 0 friendly casualties. Quindal stared at his displays, unable to process what he'd witnessed. Captain, please repeat your status report. Mission complete, sir. All human personnel accounted for and ready for extraction. We've gathered intelligence materials from the facility for analysis. How did you accomplish this? There was a brief pause before Captain Park responded. Standard infiltration and elimination procedures, sir. Nothing unusual. Nothing unusual. 50 soldiers had just eliminated a force twice their size using methods that defied understanding, and their commander called it standard procedure. Captain, our sensors showed your forces disappearing during the assault. Can you explain this phenomenon? Disappearing, sir? I'm not sure what you mean. We maintained radio silence during the operation to avoid detection, but we never left the area. Quindal realized the humans were being deliberately evasive. They clearly possessed capabilities they hadn't revealed during training, but they weren't willing to discuss them openly. Very well, Captain. Prepare for extraction. Well done. Thank you, sir. The Void Seekers won't be using this facility again. As the human forces returned to their transport ships, Quindal tried. Xenopsychologist Dr. Morveck's tentacles trembled as he processed the emergency data streams flooding into his research station. 3 days had passed since the Callus Prime incident, and the War Council demanded immediate answers about human capabilities. What should have been a simple evaluation had become an urgent investigation into the true nature of their new allies. Dr. Morvek, his research assistant Yiktel, announced through the intercom, "The additional data files from Earth observation have arrived. Command has authorized access to previously classified historical records. Morvek's species, the Velani, possessed superior analytical capabilities that made them ideal for xenopsychological research. Their branching neural networks could process vast amounts of cultural and behavioral data simultaneously, identifying patterns that escaped other species. But the human data was unlike anything he'd encountered in 40 years of alien psychology. Display the Earth conflict analysis, focusing on historical warfare patterns," he instructed his computer systems. The holographic workspace filled with data representing thousands of years of human military history. What Morvek saw challenged every assumption the hegemony had made about their new allies. Human warfare wasn't primitive, it was horrifyingly sophisticated. The record showed conflicts involving millions of combatants, strategic planning spanning decades, and weapons development that prioritized lethality over everything else. More disturbing were the casualty numbers. Individual human conflicts had resulted in death tolls that exceeded the entire population of most alien species. Computer, analyze the ratio of combatant to civilian casualties in major human conflicts. The results made Morvek's tentacles curl in distress. In recent human history, civilian casualties often exceeded military losses by substantial margins. These beings didn't just fight soldiers, they waged war against entire populations. Yet during first contact, they'd appeared concerned about protecting innocent life. Yiktel, review the first contact transcripts. Focus on human statements about protecting peaceful civilizations. Dr. Morvek, there's something strange about those statements. The humans repeatedly emphasized their desire to protect peaceful species and innocent civilizations. They never used terms like weak or primitive that most warrior cultures prefer. This was significant. Aggressive species typically viewed non-combatants with contempt or indifference, but humans seemed to make careful distinctions between combatants and non-combatants, showing protective instincts toward beings they perceived as innocent. Computer, analyze human military doctrine regarding civilian protection. More data filled the workspace, showing complex rules of engagement designed to minimize non-combatant casualties. Human militaries spent considerable resources developing precision weapons and tactics that reduced collateral damage. This was extremely unusual for a species that regularly engaged in total war. Dr. Morvek? Yiktel's voice carried growing alarm. "I've found something disturbing in the weapons development data. The humans possess technology they haven't revealed to us." "Explain." "Nuclear weapons, biological warfare agents, chemical weapons capable of killing millions. They have the capability to exterminate all life on their planet, yet they've voluntarily restricted their use." Morvek felt his analytical matrices struggling to process this information. Species capable of total extinction typically use such weapons without hesitation. The concept of deliberately limiting one's own destructive capability was alien to most military thinking. "Show me the restriction mechanisms." The data revealed international treaties, voluntary agreements, and self-imposed limitations on weapons usage. Humans had developed the capability to destroy their entire planet, then collectively decided not to use it. This suggested psychological sophistication that bordered on the impossible. Computer, analyze the combat footage from Callus Prime. Focus on human tactical methods and compare them to historical Earth warfare. The holographic display showed the impossible battle from 3 days ago. Morvek watched 50 humans eliminate a superior enemy force using methods that seemed supernatural, but comparing this to historical data revealed disturbing patterns. The stealth capabilities they demonstrated, Morvek realized aloud, they're consistent with documented human special forces operations on Earth. "Sir, look at these Earth military records. Humans have units that specialize in invisible warfare, infiltration, sabotage, elimination of high-value targets. What we witnessed wasn't impossible technology. It was refined technique developed over centuries of conflict." Morvek's tentacles moved frantically as he processed more connections. The humans hadn't used alien stealth technology at Callus Prime. They'd used camouflage, misdirection, and tactical movement refined through generations of warfare against opponents who possessed equivalent sensor technology. "Yiktel, Analyze the psychological profiles of human soldiers. Compare their stress responses to other auxiliary species. The comparison was shocking. Where most species showed increasing stress as combat intensity rose, humans demonstrated the opposite pattern. Their effectiveness actually improved under pressure, reaching peak performance in life-threatening situations. Dr. Morvek, this suggests they've evolved for high-stress combat environments. Most species fight when necessary for survival. Humans appear to have been shaped by constant conflict over evolutionary timescales. This revelation was terrifying. The hegemony had recruited apex predators who'd spent millions of years perfecting the art of killing. Every aspect of human biology and psychology was optimized for warfare. Computer, analyze human social bonding patterns. Focus on unit cohesion under combat stress. The data showed something unprecedented in galactic military history. Human soldiers didn't just fight for their own survival or abstract goals. They fought for each other with a ferocity that increased proportionally to the threat level faced by their companions. This explains the Callus Prime audio recordings, Morvek realized. The Void Seekers weren't experiencing fear because of human technology. They were experiencing fear because humans were hunting them. Sir, look at the acoustic analysis. The Void Seeker distress signals match patterns of prey animals being stalked by pack predators. Humans weren't just attacking an enemy position. They were conducting a hunt. Morvek pulled up recordings of human social interactions during training. What the hegemony had interpreted as primitive bonding rituals were actually sophisticated psychological preparation for coordinated combat. Humans were conditioning themselves to fight as a single organism while maintaining individual tactical flexibility. Yictel, I need you to analyze something specific. During human training, did they ever demonstrate their maximum capabilities? Let me check the performance evaluations. There was a long pause. Dr. Morvek, this is strange. In every single evaluation, humans performed exactly at the level required to meet expectations. Never significantly below, but also never dramatically above. They were hiding their true abilities. It appears so, sir. But why would an auxiliary species conceal their combat effectiveness? Morvek felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Computer, analyze human questions during technical briefings. Focus on inquiries about hegemony military capabilities and strategic doctrine. The pattern was unmistakable. While appearing to seek education about alien technology, humans had systematically gathered intelligence about hegemony strengths, weaknesses, and tactical limitations. They'd conducted a comprehensive assessment of their new allies' military capabilities. They've been studying us, Morvek whispered. From the moment of first contact, they've been analyzing our capabilities, our psychology, our strategic thinking. But sir, they're our allies. They volunteered to fight the Void Seekers, did they? Or did they allow us to recruit them for reasons we don't understand? Morvek accessed the first contact records again, reading them with new understanding. Commander Veltar had approached Earth offering protection and technology in exchange for military service. The humans had accepted with remarkable speed, showing little surprise at the existence of galactic civilization. Computer, analyze human reactions during first contact. Compare their responses to other species' first contact experiences. The comparison was revealing. Most species required extensive time to accept the reality of alien contact, followed by psychological adjustment periods that could last years. Humans had adapted almost immediately, asking practical questions about military requirements and strategic objectives. They weren't surprised by our existence, Morvek realized. They were expecting us. That's impossible, sir. Earth had no knowledge of galactic civilization before contact. Maybe not official knowledge. But look at their cultural productions. Fiction, entertainment, speculative scenarios. Humans have been imagining contact with alien species for centuries. They'd already considered every possible variation of first contact. This suggested a level of strategic thinking that made Morvek's analytical matrices strain. Humans had culturally prepared for alien contact across generations, developing psychological frameworks for every conceivable scenario. When contact actually occurred, they were ready. Yictel, pull up the psychological evaluation of Dr. Hana Lee. I want to understand the human scientist's true purpose. Dr. Lee's file showed impressive. Commander Veltar stood in the War Council chamber as alarms blared throughout the hegemony homeworld. The massive viewing screens displayed tactical data that painted a picture of absolute disaster. The Void Seekers had launched their final offensive, and conventional hegemony forces were crumbling under the assault. "Status report," Supreme Commander Theklar demanded, his ancient voice tight with strain. Fleet Admiral Kexvar consulted her tactical displays with obvious reluctance. "Sir, we've lost contact with the outer defense grid. Enemy forces have penetrated to the third defensive line. At current rates of advance, they'll reach the homeworld within 18 standard hours." Veltar felt his scales ripple with anxiety. In all his years of service, he'd never imagined the hegemony facing extinction. Their technological superiority had always been sufficient to maintain defensive positions against any threat. But the Void Seekers had adapted faster than anyone thought possible. "What about our allies?" Theklar asked. "Where are the human forces?" "Captain Park's company is currently stationed at the forward command post," Admiral Kexvar replied. "They've been requesting permission to engage enemy forces directly, but we've maintained them in reserve pending tactical assessment." Veltar remembered his confident predictions about human usefulness as auxiliary forces. 6 months ago, he'd viewed them as expendable soldiers who would serve as effective cannon fodder. Now, with hegemony forces failing across multiple fronts, those 50 human soldiers might represent their last hope. "Sir," Communications Officer Darlene interrupted, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Captain Park." "Put her through." Captain Jiwan Park's image appeared on the main screen. Even in the chaos of impending defeat, she maintained the composed professionalism that had impressed Veltar during first contact. Behind her, other human soldiers prepared equipment with calm efficiency that contrasted sharply with the panic spreading through hegemony ranks. "Supreme Commander," Captain Park said, "we've been monitoring the tactical situation. With respect, sir, we believe current defensive strategies are insufficient to stop the Void Seeker advance." Theklar's expression darkened. "Captain, our military doctrine has protected the hegemony for thousands of years. These creatures are simply more numerous than anticipated. Sir, the problem isn't numbers, it's approach. You're fighting a defensive war against an enemy that specializes in overwhelming static positions. They're using your own tactical strengths against you." Veltar noticed something in Captain Park's tone. Not criticism, but the patient explanation of a teacher addressing a confused student. She wasn't questioning hegemony competence so much as trying to educate them about realities they didn't understand. "What do you suggest, Captain?" Theklar asked. Captain Park exchanged a brief look with Lieutenant Minho, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Sir, we request permission to engage the enemy without tactical restrictions." "Explain what you mean by without restrictions." "Currently, we're operating under hegemony rules of engagement. Those rules are designed for your style of warfare. Precise, measured, technologically superior. They're not optimized for the threat we're facing." Admiral Kexvar leaned forward. "Captain, hegemony doctrine emphasizes minimal casualties and preservation of resources. These principles have served us well. Respectfully, Admiral, those principles work when you're fighting enemies who share similar values. The Void Seekers don't care about casualties or resources. They care about consumption and expansion. Fighting them requires different methods." Veltar felt an odd chill. Captain Park's words carried implications he didn't want to consider. "What exactly are you proposing, Captain?" "Sir, let us fight the way we know how to fight. Stop requiring us to minimize collateral damage, maintain formation integrity, or preserve enemy infrastructure. Let us eliminate the threat using whatever methods prove effective." Supreme Commander Theklar was quiet for a long moment. "Captain, your force consists of 50 soldiers. Even with total tactical freedom, how can you accomplish what our combined fleets cannot?" Captain Park's expression remained neutral, but Veltar caught something in her eyes, a flicker of the predator he'd begun to suspect lurked beneath humanity's civilized surface. "Sir, we're not just 50 soldiers. We're humans, and we've been holding back. Holding back how? We've been operating under the assumption that our allies prefer minimal violence and limited destruction. We've adapted our tactics to match your comfort levels rather than optimize for mission effectiveness." Dr. Hana Lee stepped into view behind Captain Park. "Supreme Commander, if I may explain from a technical perspective, human warfare doctrine has evolved through millions of years of conflict against opponents with equivalent capabilities. Our methods are optimized for situations where failure means extinction. Dr. Lee, we appreciate human combat effectiveness. But the scale of this threat... Sir, Dr. Lee interrupted gently, we understand the scale. We've been preparing for threats like this since we achieved spaceflight. Actually, we've been preparing for threats like this since we achieved organized civilization. Veltar realized that Dr. Lee wasn't talking about recent preparation. She was describing evolutionary adaptation across species-wide timescales. Humans had spent their entire developmental history preparing for existential conflicts. What are you asking for specifically? Thekler demanded. Sergeant Dongyun appeared in the background along with other human soldiers. They were no longer maintaining the respectful distance that had characterized their behavior since first contact. Instead, they moved with the focused intensity of predators preparing to hunt. Permission to treat the Void Seekers as an extinction threat, Captain Park said simply. They are an extinction threat. No, sir. You don't understand. You're treating them as a military problem requiring military solutions. We're asking permission to treat them as an extinction threat requiring whatever solutions prove necessary. The distinction seemed subtle, but Veltar sensed it carried enormous implications. Military problems had rules, limitations, and acceptable casualties. Extinction threats had only one rule: survive. Captain, be specific about what you're requesting. Full tactical autonomy. No restrictions on methods, weapons, or targets. Permission to engage enemy forces using optimal rather than acceptable strategies. Admiral Kexvar looked alarmed. Captain, such authorization could result in enormous collateral damage and civilian casualties. Admiral, with respect, the Void Seekers aren't civilians. They're a species-wide military force dedicated to consuming all life in the galaxy. There are no non-combatants in their ranks. What about damage to hegemony infrastructure in allied territories? Captain Park's expression grew grim. Admiral, if we don't stop the Void Seekers, there won't be any infrastructure or territories left to protect. Veltar felt the weight of decision settling on the War Council. They could continue conventional tactics and almost certainly face extinction within hours, or they could authorize their human allies to use methods that might save everyone while revealing capabilities that would forever change the balance of power in the galaxy. Captain, Thekler said slowly, if we grant this authorization, what assurances can you provide about post-conflict cooperation? Sir, our goal has always been to protect peaceful civilizations from existential threats. That goal doesn't change regardless of how we accomplish it. But your capabilities might change our relationship significantly. Captain Park nodded. Yes, sir, they might. But the alternative is that there won't be any relationship left to change. Veltar watched the Supreme Commander weigh impossible choices. Authorization might reveal that humans were far more dangerous than anyone suspected. Refusal would likely result in extinction for all peaceful species in the galaxy. Very well, Theklar decided. Captain Park, you are hereby authorized to engage Void Seeker forces using whatever methods you deem necessary. All hegemony forces are instructed to provide support as requested and avoid interference with human operations. Thank you, sir. We'll begin immediately. Captain, one final question. How long do you estimate this will take? Captain Park consulted with her soldiers briefly. Sir, if you're asking how long until the immediate threat is neutralized, probably 6 to 8 hours. If you're asking how long until the Void Seeker threat is permanently eliminated, perhaps 2 to 3 weeks. Admiral Kexvar stared at the screen. Captain, you're talking about accomplishing in weeks what our combined fleets haven't managed in years. Yes, ma'am. But we haven't been fighting them the way we fight existential threats. The communication ended, leaving the War Council in stunned silence. Veltar realized they'd just authorized something unprecedented in galactic history, giving apex predators permission to stop restraining themselves. Sir, Communications Officer Dal'een reported, we're detecting massive activity from human positions. Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. Show me. The tactical displays updated to show the human staging area. What had been 50 soldiers was now something entirely different. Movement patterns suggested coordinated activity on a scale that seemed impossible for such a small force. Sir, Admiral Kexvar said urgently, long-range sensors are detecting new energy signatures throughout the system. It's as if additional forces have appeared from nowhere. Veltar felt reality.